that submarine would have called for orders, and based on the way the Pentagon's thinking, they would have received orders to just go ahead and execute a torpedo strike. They launched a Mark 48 ADCAP torpedo, and that torpedo hit the submarine, hit the frigate by the stern, broke it in half, and it went under almost immediately. The Iranians reported out when they left port there were 180 sailors on board that ship. 38 were rescued. So we have 87 bodies that were recovered, and then the rest are missing.
Hello and welcome to the Trump Report. I'm Louis Sykes. Today we're joined by Malcolm Nance, intelligence and foreign policy analyst and US Navy veteran. Malcolm, welcome back.
My pleasure.
It's always great to speak with you, Malcolm. Well, Trump and Israel's war on Iran is heading towards its second week now. From what we can infer, the objectives appear to be regime change, disarmament, and pushing Iran to give up any nuclear capability. Are we seeing the US getting any closer to those objectives with the wide range of major strikes that have been going on for the last week?
Well, first off, assassinating the leadership through the decapitation strike that the Israelis did does not give you regime change. What that does is that gives you a leadership change, sort of like what happened in Venezuela, right? The system is still in place, the country is still in place, the regime is still in place. All you do now is you just have people choose whoever is the next person as supreme leader. By killing Ayatollah Khamenei, you just need to understand he is the religious leader of the country, and that as religious leader, he has immense power. It is a Shia-dominated nation, and that, he controls the forces that keep the Islamic Revolution of 1979 alive. So he was 89 years old. By killing him, all you did was accelerate the secession process. Now, as you know, there is a council of elders who choose. There's 88 of them that choose the next leader. They are not all in one place, and the United States and Israel hit the council center meeting building in the city of Qum, thinking that we could just decapitate them, the people who make the decision, and go on. You would have to work your way down, killing every person in the Shia imamate in Iran. It's ludicrous, right? There is no one individual that you can kill and the system would fall apart. And that's what they appeared to really think was going to happen. Now, that's short-sighted, and it tells me that they do not care what experts think. They have an image in their head that's largely driven by Israel. Let's be honest now. The United States has made it clear that they and Israel spent thousands and thousands of man-hours, I'm quoting Pete Hegseth, coordinating this mission over months, if not years, that they were going to do this. So even their negotiations with Iran turned out to have been a deliberate ruse to support the intelligence collection to carry out this decapitation strike. So that being said, they expected something that I'm not quite sure why they believed it would happen, which is not regime change, but regime collapse, to where the entire structure, someone must have given them a false belief that the structure of Iranian government amongst the Revolutionary Guard Corps and amongst the imamate is a house of cards, when in fact they had a revolution over decades, a solid decade in the 1970s that brought this system about. They chose this system to exist, and it has existed for over 50 years. The revolution was 47 years ago, but you had 10 years of strife to bring back the Ayatollah Khamenei, and now they have, over 50 years, they have built in a hardened structure that is part of their culture. Are there people who want freedom? Are there people who want more liberty? Are the young men there disaffected because they can't get jobs or find wives or get more Western, freedoms? Yes. And they protested in January and were massacred on a large scale, and the United States did nothing, which may have been a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how you see it, because you cannot bomb a revolution into existence. So from this point forward, no matter how many IRGC buildings we bomb, how many ships we sink, how many air bases we destroy, 93 million people are still living with the million Bashji Revolutionary Guard volunteers with their rifles, the policemen, the firemen, the infrastructure of the state that are paying people, and they're still there.
And just today, this morning, in the US time, Eastern time, Trump has called for an unconditional surrender from Iran. What does that actually mean when there are no US boots on the ground? There's no one to take the surrender, as it were. Is there any clarity to that message that you can decipher?
Well, for those of you who can actually see me, you notice I'm trying not to break out into just abject laughter here. I'm just trying not to dignify this with the joke that it is. You know, Trump has no idea what's going on. I'm going to be straight up professional intelligence analysis. I know I have said this before on the Trump report. I think it's just important for me. If this were Burundi, or Burma, Myanmar, or Sri Lanka, and if I saw these activities from another leader, I would say this is mental illness, right? Masquerading as foreign policy or manifesting itself through foreign policy in which people are dying by the thousands. And there is no cognitive reason for any of this to have occurred if they did not plan out an end game. If the end game was the regime collapses, right? Then you would have to wait for that regime to collapse. If the other end game was we get rid of your ballistic missile production capability and destroy all your launchers to protect Israel and our Gulf state allies, okay, keep doing that and don't say anything until that point. But that was another one. If the end game was to destroy the Iranian Navy, which was pretty much just a picture Navy, right? It really wasn't designed to have good capability. It's the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps' 33,000 speedboats, okay, that could carry 10 men each, that could literally bring an army across the Gulf and destroy every oil field that exists there, which would end the world economic order, which Iran has that capability still existing. I wrote about this in a Substack article called 1001 Arabian Nightmares. If that's the case, the Trump administration should have stated it. President Trump did the State of the Union, what was it, more than just 2 weeks ago. And he didn't mention a word about anything about Iran not having a nuclear weapon, you know, maybe a little bit. But if that was not mentioned, that America was threatening to go to war, then that speech was strategic deception, not against the Iranians. They've been preparing for us to attack for decades. They were prepared for us to attack over this last month. It was strategic deception against America and the world to not know that he was about to launch a war with Israel. So for Trump to come out now, today, and say, after he made a crazy statement yesterday, that he wanted to take part in the selection of who would be the leader of Iran. This is not, you know, trying to find, you know, the West Asia's top mullah. Okay? This is real politic in a real world where every word out of his mouth costs people either their livelihoods or their lives. And then to flip the next day and say, well, my real goal is, I don't know who he's channeling. Is he channeling Eisenhower? Is he channeling FDR and Churchill at Malta, at Yalta? Is he trying to channel Lincoln, Ulysses S. Grant? Unconditional surrender? It's not just to whom, it's to how. Because now you bombed every one of the IRGC headquarters there, right? You bombed those headquarters, and the IRGC soldiers, the IRGC policemen, the Rev Guard, Bashji, they're at home having tea. And you can't bomb every house. You can't bomb every logistics support agency, which they call their mom and their wives and their cousins who bring them tea and lunch out while they're sitting in their patrol cars on the street looking out for protest, right? The infrastructure is the humans that remain on the ground. Now, straight up, right? Real talk here. This is a sign of mental illness. Who are they going to surrender to? Like Trump says on the first day, now it's time for the Iranian people to rise up. They did. And it cost them between 30 and 50,000 of them their lives. And those were the activists who died. And now who we're going to surrender to? Is he intending to put a ground force in Iran to come in there? Is he going to keep assassinating his way through leadership? Let me give him a little bit of intelligence here, because I know he does not listen to anyone that speaks Arabic. He does not, or Farsi, pardon me, either one of the two languages. He does not listen to anyone who's an expert, right, on the Arabian Gulf, Persian Gulf. He does not speak to anyone in the intelligence community who has operated in there. We have guys who are intelligence officers who have run spies in there who may be giving them good tactical intelligence, but very bad political intelligence. He's listening to the Iranian diaspora, many of whom haven't been in Iran or were born outside of Iran after 1979. And he's making decisions based on whatever he thinks at this minute. So he doesn't know. I have on a warship sailed every inch of the Iranian coast from Charbahar all the way up to Bandar Khomeini in the north. 2 days, day and night, of a warship moving at full speed. It is not small. It's the size of the American Midwest. It has a population of 93 million people. And it is diverse, but for him to make a statement like that, here's what's happening. I'm going to give you straight up intelligence analysis of what's happening. Every person that looks at their mobile phone in the next few hours in Iran that's associated with the Rev Guard or the former regime, and even the average person on the street, are literally rolling in their chairs laughing, because it is the stupidest thing. Unconditional surrender, no problem. Can I have another chai? It's dumb. And that's what's happening here. No adult is in the room. And it's dangerous. The Gulf states have already warned the entire system over there could collapse in 2 weeks of moving oil to the world, or natural gas.
And you mentioned there is this significant naval element to this conflict. We saw on Wednesday the sinking of an Iranian Navy ship by a US submarine. At least 87 people, Iranian sailors, were killed. Others were rescued by the Sri Lankan Navy. What do we know about this specific attack, Malcolm?
Yeah. Well, first off, we know quite a bit about the attack because we have video of the attack. Full disclosure, I was in when I was in the Navy, qualified in submarines, rode submarines, did submarine operations. It was a very relatively straightforward military mission. Now, this wasn't the sinking of the General Belgrano in the Falklands like HMS Conqueror did, but the submarine was clearly put off of eastern India to track the two vessels that were taking part in an international fleet review on the eastern side of India. Those vessels started to transit out of India, down south, past Sri Lanka, and then they made the unfortunate decision to go south of Sri Lanka, turn west, which means they would be entering with the intention to transit into the Indian Ocean. Now, they had 2,000 miles of steaming, but I'm certain the orders were pretty clear. The sub's captain would have come up, would have gotten messages saying, hey, we are tracking this vessel, the frigate Dena, even though it had no capability of really harming us in any way, shape, or form. And 2,000 miles would take quite a bit of time. That submarine would have called for orders, and based on the way the Pentagon's thinking, they would have received orders to just go ahead and execute a torpedo strike. They launched a Mark 48 ADCAP torpedo, and that torpedo hit the frigate by the stern, broke it in half, and it went under almost immediately. The Iranians reported out when they left port there were 180 sailors on board that ship. 38 were rescued. So we have 87 bodies that were recovered, and then the rest are missing.
So you mentioned the Belgrano there, Malcolm. There were questions at the time the Belgrano was sunk about whether or not the British Navy was right to do it. On account of where the ship was, wasn't in the active combat zone. It was read as being heading towards that zone. Are there any of those sort of questions over this Iranian ship being in international waters and being sunk there?
Yeah, well, you can have questions. First off, international waters is not protection when you're in a time of armed conflict. There are a lot of people out there saying this is not a war. This is a war. The Geneva Convention states that at any time two parties are engaged in armed conflict, even if one party does not recognize the attack, the state of armed conflict exists. That is war. You don't have to declare it when guns are shooting and bombs is a flying. We've had 1,300 combat missions, striking 638 targets, dropping tens of thousands of tons of explosives on Iran. You are at war. So Iranian warships moving south, moving towards the Indian Ocean is fair game. The General Belgrano was, in any other war, we would have sunk it the moment it left port, right? 12 nautical miles torpedo. We gave those ships the opportunity to do, which is what the supply ship that has gone into Trincomalee has done, which is recognize there's a state of war, recognize that you do not want to participate in it, pull into a neutral port, surrender your crew for detention, and go have margaritas. That's how it generally is done if you realize you are outgunned and outclassed. The Iranians should have known we would have had a submarine there, and yeah, as you see from Pentagon, the Pentagon and Secretary of Defense Hegseth shouting, enjoying the fact that they killed 100 some odd men. But the Iranians had their chance not to move towards the Indian Ocean. No warnings. That's not what submarines are for.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned earlier your Substack article, Malcolm. It's a great read, and our audience should go and have a look if they have the time today. One of the scenarios you laid out there involved the Kurds. We are now getting reports. It's not been on the front of too many papers, but we are getting reports that the US are supporting the Kurds, who are beginning to mobilize against Iran. There's a lot to discuss here, but just in the first instance, what do we think the US are trying to get the Kurds to do?
Well, the article that I wrote was called 1001 Arabian Nightmares, and I only gave 4 scenarios which could occur in the next 30 days, which could change things dramatically. I mean, really hurt people and create a much, much bigger conflict. And one of those scenarios is that clearly there's a lot of people in the Pentagon, there's a lot of people in the administration who are playing out their fantasies of what didn't occur during the war on terror. We worked with the Kurds for years during Operation Iraqi Freedom. When we invaded Iraq, we actually took over a Kurdish group that was being run by Saddam Hussein, Kurdish Iranians called the MEK, the Mujahideen al-Khalq. And they were a terrorist group Saddam Hussein was sending into Iran to do acts of terror in Iran. And we took them and made them our own little group. In the north were the Peshmerga in the Kurdish parts of Iraq, out of Erbil, Sulaymaniyah, that we coordinated with when we did the initial invasion. And we did a no-fly zone for 10 years to protect them after the chemical weapons attack in Halabja. So now somebody at some point in somewhere has said, hey, what if we stoke a rebellion of the Iranian Kurds, which are led by a group called the KDPI, which is the Iranian Internal Resistance. 10% of Iran's ethnicities are Kurdish. They all live in the west in Bargan province, right? Which is um no, did I say Bargan? That's their region. The province is Iranian Kurdistan. And their major towns there, Maravan, Sanajad, all these are really close to the Iraqi border. And they are planning to stoke a rebellion in there so that they either join with the Iraqi Kurds, who are very different, who are also based on Kurds that left Iran back in the 60s and 70s, and hopes that they could create an insurgency within Iran that would do what? March on Tehran? I have no earthly idea. Okay, because the Iranian army is intact. And the United States and Israel intends to act as an air force for the Kurds. Israel, as a matter of fact, kicked this off by blasting virtually every border checkpoint between Iraq, Kurdistan, and Iranian Kurdistan. Then they started attacking IRGC bases. The United States is in there now. Clarissa Ward from CNN had a report just today that someone in the Iraqi city of Erbil bought 50 Toyota Land Cruiser pickup trucks. Just like that. That is the official vehicle of an insurgency, right? The Toyota pickup. All sorts of crazy things are going on. U.S. Special Operations aircraft, 9 of them, have just flown into a British air base, I think Mildenhall, one after another. MC-130J combat Talon aircraft. Those aircraft are designed to penetrate semi-permissive or semi-hostile airspaces like Iran, right? In support of special operations missions, insertions and distractions of spies, insurgents, resupply of insurgencies, things like that. Lots of things are tipping off that we intend to do that. And then Trump himself, started making noise about maybe we'll support the Kurds. This is a man who abandoned the Kurds, the PKK, after they had wiped out ISIS for us. He abandoned them and let the Turks attack them. Now, Malcolm, how could this get worse? And this is what I wrote in my article. There is no people that hate the Kurds more than the Turks. And the Turks at every opportunity, because almost a quarter, I wouldn't say a quarter, maybe a fifth of Turkey, the eastern fifth, is Kurdish. And the Turks have been ruling that place with an iron fist. And every time they see something that looks like a Kurdish homeland for independence, they bring out the entire Turkish army and they try to wipe it out. They did it in northern Syria with our blessing after we had screwed our allies who had helped us kill ISIS. So what chance do the Kurds have over there if this goes south? I can tell you what's going to happen. If those groups join together, the Turks are coming. And they're not going to allow it. And let me tell you, the Turks hate the Kurds more than they hate the Iranians. And a NATO country may even silently coordinate with the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps to make sure that there is no Kurdish rebellion.
And we have heard some reports that the Iraqi government have stated their troops have clashed with what have been described as foreign troops in the Najaf Karbala desert. What do you make of those reports? Is that part of some of this behind the scenes maneuvering we're seeing going on?
Yeah, I don't give that a lot of credence. I saw that one report. People were saying, "Oh, there's U.S. Special Operations aircraft flying over this desert." Najaf Desert, been there, done that. West of the city of Ambar, big, wide desert. What would that clash be? What would we do there that we wouldn't do by landing at Al Assad Air Base, giant air base there, or landing in Erbil, or landing in the fields of Sulaymaniyah? Why would we even need to go there? People were saying they were penetrating to go into Iran, not in the middle of the day. So I would discount those because, all sorts of spurious little things come on. Everything looks like, a rebellion. But the signs that we're seeing up in Iraqi Kurdistan, they're not signs. They're not unambiguous. They're very, very clear signs that there is a special operations supported, intelligence supported activity occurring up there and that we are preparing to rearm, refuel. and kick off somebody, whether it's just running agents or getting together and coordinating with these groups. The problem is, if we see it and are talking about it on radio and TV, the Iranians have agents in there. The Iranians see it because remember, they're on the ground, drinking tea, eating dates. And we are a bunch of Westerners who think that we can, as Rudyard Kipling put it, hustle the East, which, by the way, is an epitaph, right? Here lies the fool who tried to hustle the East. This game has not been thought out. This is just pickup ball, football, soccer, ice hockey game that they've picked up in the middle of a desert. And I'm not sure what's going on, but I can tell you what's not going on. There was no forethought or planning to any of this.
Well, Malcolm Nance, intelligence and foreign policy analyst and US Navy veteran, thank you very much for joining us again on the Trump Report.
My pleasure.